Good evening and welcome to CITI Media Reporter. I'm Howard Homanoff. Thank you for joining us. My guest this evening is Dean Denhart, CEO of Black Arrow TV, one of the innovators in the video-on-demand advertising space. Dean, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Howard.
So let's start with Black Arrow, okay? You got TV in your name. Maybe it's a little bit of a clue, but give me a sense of where Black Arrow TV fits into that kind of the television ecosystem.
Sure. Let's actually back it up a bit.
Yep.
And let's talk a little bit about the TV industry, and then I can kind of slide Black Arrow into that, because I think it's really interesting to see what's happening. We all know what's going on in the TV world, and we hear it over and over again about how the consumption of television is changing. First and foremost, I think it's important to understand the consumer's driving everything. Obviously, there's a subset that has to do with the technology piece, but the reality is the way in which the consumer is choosing to consume content these days is fundamentally different than it was even 3-5 years ago. That's a combination of a lot of different things: the social, the technology, the devices, etc. As they do that, everybody wants to consume their content where they want on whatever device. We all know that. That's a very given kind of premise, right? And so when they do that, everybody, of course, also wants the content as cheaply as possible. And everybody says, well, I want to be able to do this and pay as little as I can. At the same time, everybody likes good content. And we're at a very interesting age of really great content. The challenge the industry has, and the challenge everybody has that wants to play in this space, is how do you ensure that the industry can continue to make great content? And how do you ensure that the consumer can continue to be able to watch what they want, when they want, on whatever device they want? The only way you can do that is, in our opinion, is through advertising. And advertising still matters very much in this industry. And so what Black Arrow does is we help ensure that the consumer gets a very good experience watching the content they want on whatever device they want. But at the same time, we work with those that provide the content and distribute the content in such a way that they can still effectively make money with their content by putting in the right advertising and the right message on the right device at the right time. So what Black Arrow is all about is, both for on-demand and for the OTT kind of world as it relates to live television consumption, is how do you ensure the relevance of the ads against the content that's being played based on a myriad of different variables. And that's what we do, is we simplify that, and we provide that in such a way that the consumer gets a great experience, but at the same time the pay TV operators or the OTT providers are able to make money.
What do you think is the future of, clearly the advertising business, a critical part of the future of television? How about the subscription side of it? Are people going to, I guess what I'm asking is, does more and more pressure come to the advertising side because there's only so much you can wring out of the consumer in paying subscriber fees? Or you may not agree with that, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think we do. I wouldn't call it pressure, though. I think what I would call it would be opportunity. Is because what you have is the subscription is going to continue to get more and more pressure, because you've got a lot of new entrants into the market that are more virtual compared to the classic pay TV operators, the satellite, cable, telco guys. And so subscription is going to have a ceiling, or it's going to keep moving up at an incremental basis. The opportunity really revolves around advertising. How do you take advantage of the fact that there's more and more information about what people watch and how they watch it and what kind of devices? And I can provide a relevant experience to that consumer. So if I'm into sports and I can provide sports-related advertising to that consumer, that's got a high value. And so if we can do that in a very conscious, measurable, repeatable way, that what you're seeing is you're going to be able to see higher margin lift for those that provide the content, and at the same time the consumer's getting a better experience. So I really don't think it's a pressure, it's really more of an opportunity. And we see that opportunity as being massive. Just massive.
So, if you watch the World Cup, obviously, you see the advertisers who have created spots that are, whether it's with a figure like Lionel Messi or whether it, in a location, very much oriented around the cup. Other than the obvious of, well, we're going to make 30-second spots that look like they're just sort of related to that content, can you give me some other examples of how do you deliver something, and what is it that if I'm the consumer, what am I getting that makes it for the advertiser sort of a better link between the consumer, the content, and my product?
Oh, sure. So think about this. So think about a 30-minute sitcom. A 30-minute sitcom typically has 22, 23 minutes of content and 6, 7 minutes of commercials. And on an average, that's a 30-second commercial. That's 14 commercials. So when you watch that on live television, which of course fewer and fewer people are doing, as we all know, in some cases as much as more than 80% of a top primetime show is being time shifted in some way, either through a DVR or through on demand. If you're able to take that 23 minutes and supplement it with half or a third or even a fourth of those commercials, and assume that as opposed to 14 30-second commercials, you're able to give them 5, I'm making this up, 5 10-second commercials. You're given, and those commercials are relevant to that consumer. They're a pet owner, they're a renter with a certain income that has a smartphone that owns a BMW. All that information that you can get through a lot of third-party sources, if you're able to provide that kind of relevance to the consumer as they consume that, the consumer's getting a fantastic experience, but at the same time, while you may have less ads, the value of every ad is much higher. And that's really what we're all about, is how do you ensure that the consumer gets a great experience, but at the same time, you ensure the consistency and the upside potential of the entire ecosystem, from the content provider to the distributor to the consumer. How do you keep that circle virtuous?
Is what you're describing technologically, we joked before, so you don't need to go into any algorithms for me, but is that all technologically possible today, and it's a matter of the business catching up to the technology, or is there still a lot of technological work necessary to make that vision more of a reality?
Oh, no, I think most people would generally agree that technology is there today. So, for example, with Black Arrow, we're actually in front of 32 million households in North America today and growing extensively into Europe right now. The technology is there. We do it today. We literally do it billions of times a month now. And so it's really more of the rest of the ecosystem, the business processes catching up. It's really, you're talking about a very large, complex ecosystem. You've got, in the TV industry, it's right around $72 billion of spend last year. The online was roughly around $6 billion. Both are still growing dramatically. There's a lot of process. There's a lot of embedded, if you want to call it, people process in there, a lot of cultural things that have to change. And so we've absolutely seen the technology get deployed. We've actually absolutely starting to see a lot of the fundamentals around how to make it work. And we're really starting to see the growth. We're starting to see significant traction. You know, you can use whatever analogy like first innings, first act, first quarter. We're still early, but we're seeing very positive signs about this growth, absolutely.
Do you have
and it's not a technology issue. I think that was an excuse for a long time, and I think that technology, not just by ourselves, but by others, has been proven out. You don't really hear, a lot of times when we go into conversations today with current customers or prospective customers or the industry, is what we see is we rarely talk about technology. It's really, nobody questions that the technology works anymore. It's really more about how do I monetize this? How do I make this work? How do I make more money faster? It's not ever about the technology anymore.
So what's the evangelical mission? What you know, you got to get things to change. You guys get, in a sense, a lot more of what it will take to do it than maybe people that have been, you know, not as focused on this particular space as you've been. What's the challenge of getting the system and all of its various actors lined up to execute?
So I think maybe said differently is, what's the tipping point? And so if you think about it, the consumer's already shifted. We know that, and nobody questions that on so many levels. There's been so much talked about that. And we're starting to see the economics start to shift. So the reality is most people most businesses run either on fear or greed. I think in this situation, you got both. There's a huge, tremendous opportunity to make a lot more money than has historically been made in this space. That's one. The second thing is, if those that don't take advantage of this are going to fail. And so those operators, those infrastructure players that aren't providing this ecosystem to be able to allow this to happen are going to be a second choice for those that have the content. As we all know, there's a tremendous amount of pressure in the TV industry between what you might want to call the incumbents, the cable satellite telco guys and the OTT guys. And the reality is, those that can provide the best level of services and options and opportunities to the content providers are going to be those that succeed. And so we think it's a combination of really fear and greed.
And so you seem fairly bullish, and using opportunity and kind of the size and growth and a lot of our the notion of discussion. So a lot of what you read in the popular press about television is, while it's mature, that's the business of the past. The future is it's all going digital, whether it's online, mobile, etc. And traditional multi-channel video is a kind of threatened species. Agree or disagree?
I totally disagree. I think it's not, and I've had this conversation many times in the past, I don't think it's an either or. Look at the data. The data will show you that consumption of content is increasing year over year, month over month. The way in which the consumer consumes that content is a combination of television, I don't even know what classic television means anymore. And so watching on a big screen on multiple devices, we have plenty of data that shows that those that watch Netflix, those that watch on demand, are also big consumers of live television. So for us, it's a combination of both the digital world and what you might want to typically call the traditional world combined together. You're really taking the best practices of the digital world and the best practices from the TV world, and you're marrying them together. And I think the concept of what's digital, what's traditional in a few years is going to be a really weird conversation, because it's not going to have any relevancy. And so I think that was a very common, cool thing to say. We got the digital guys, you got the traditional guys. It's blurred. I don't know what the difference is anymore.
How about mobile? Does mobile fit seamlessly into that, or is that still a lag and a different set of challenges, especially mobile video, which is the video of the world you live in?
Well, I mean, the consumption of, it would be hard to argue that the consumption of mobile continues to increase on mobile devices. But then again, a mobile device is a tablet or a smartphone or even a laptop. That could be on Wi-Fi, it could be on an LTE network, it could be a lot of different ways. And so I view mobile as just another way in which the content is delivered. And I don't know what mobile means, if it's over the Wi-Fi network, meaning IP, or if it's over LTE network. To me, it's really, there's a difference between how you distribute it and the device you consume it. For Black Arrow, we really don't care how it's distributed in terms of whether it's over the traditional TV network, it's over an IP network, it's over an LTE network. It's really, what is the device? What is the device that the consumer is watching it on? What is the piece of content? And what is it about that consumer that's different? And then how do you provide the relevancy to that consumer and that device in that specific situation? How it's delivered is secondary. And that's going to become, over a period of time, I watch a lot of stuff on my smartphone today on LTE. To me, I can't tell the difference if I'm on LTE or Wi-Fi. And so I don't think that's even, I think that's going to become a non-issue. It's just device. It's device and content at the end of the day, not mobile or fixed. I don't know what that means anymore.
What about trying to get credit for this, the advertising and the new way of, you're delivering, you and your partners delivering an added value of spots that should be worth more, a greater value, a greater targeting, etc. What about the agency world, some of the media measurement issues which have really plagued digital, never mind kind of call it digital, digital and TV blended. Is that going to get sorted out anytime soon? Does it not necessarily have to be one big change to make that work? What's your sense of some of those? They're not I don't see them as technological either. I see them as sort of institutional issues about around measurement and currency.
Mm-hmm. Well, measurement matters big time, for sure. And so at some You're kind of a two-part question. The first part is, yes, it will get solved anytime soon. Hard to know. I think it'll be an evolutionary process. But you really, what you think about it, you have the very traditional, classic linear consumption. I go home and appointment television at 8 o'clock. My favorite show's on. And I sit down in front of my favorite network or whatever, and I watch this show. And there's been a long-established process about how to measure that. Questionable for a lot of people on how that works, for sure. But then you have and then on the flip side, you have the digital side where, forget video for a sec, where you had a lot of display and there was measurement, questionable, and a lot of issues come up. Now you've got this blending of the two. You've got much more on demand, you've got much more time shifted, you've got a lot more over the top, you've got a lot more on smartphones. So you've got this blurring of some questionable metrics on the digital side and, relative, I wouldn't say questionable, but people have challenged it.
Yep.
So you've got all the measurement firms, now we're trying to work together to solve this process across multiple different distribution platforms. Will it get solved? Of course. It has to, because you're talking about tens and tens of billions of dollars just in the United States. As that continues to shift, measurement matters, currency is key. And so the ability to be able to say the consumers watch this specific show this many times over this many period, this many number of days on these kinds of devices is fundamental to the success of the industry. So yes, it matters very much. I think it'll be an evolutionary process, and I think there'll be some ups and downs. We're participating in that. We work with a lot of those guys. But I think the reality is it's just going to take time because it is a complicated process.
And speaking of complexity, you know, one of the areas that you have been very aggressive and successful in is international markets. You know, where, beyond the traditional or the video business, in media business in this country, you've been successful abroad. Talk a little bit about where and I know it's hard to say the international marketplace as one, there are many, but kind of what's going on, what sorts of trends, where is it, sort of a little bit of compare and contrast with what we see going on here.
Sure. Look, the international market is a fascinating place to be, and we're really excited to be in it. But you have to break it down into multiple. There's no question that the United States in many ways is a step or two ahead as it relates to the advertising component. That would be naive to think that we're a step or two ahead in terms of how consumers consume content. But in terms of the advertising sophistication, I think we're probably a little bit ahead. I think they're closing fast. And we've had some good examples in a lot of other countries where we in many ways, they're much more sophisticated about what they're doing than even what we're seeing in the United States. And so for us, we kind of look at it as what are the opportunities in Western Europe? We're seeing some really fascinating opportunities there that we're working with today. When you look at the consolidation that's going on in the industry, you know, the big guys gobbling each other up, that's not just a North American phenomenon, that's a global phenomenon. So what we are seeing in Western Europe is a really interesting opportunity for the company as we see that evolving, because everybody wants to solve this advertising problem. And more importantly, it's a data problem, or it's a data opportunity. So it's not just advertising, but they're sitting on an enormous amount of information, data about the consumption pattern. You look at South America is going through a transformation. You look at APAC, it's going through a transformation. So they're all moving forward, slightly different needs, slightly different pace, but it is very much a global phenomenon, very much. And for those that are thinking it's just a North American or just a US-centric, I think would be wrong. We're seeing opportunity everywhere. It's really exciting, and we're seeing the speed of the decision making faster than you would typically think you would see in this space, which is great.
How about when it comes to regulation? And you know, the Europeans certainly seem around things like privacy to be more aggressive than we have been, which is interesting given our First Amendment history. But in that area and in others, do you see big differences, things that concern you about as someone who not, you know, you aren't the regulated entity, it's usually your partners who may be regulated, but any concerns or obstacles that you see around the regulatory treatment around the world?
Not for Black Arrow. You know, for us, it's really important to note we don't touch. You know, when you get into the privacy world, we don't touch PII, that kind of information. We don't touch that. We don't deal with it. We don't mess in that space. So we're very cleanly hands off. That information is contained within the operator or the customer that we have. So that information isn't really presented to Black Arrow, so we don't see any of that. So that's really important to state. Right. However, I think it's really important to note, to think of Europe as one entity would be a mistake. It's multiple countries, and the difference between Ireland and UK and Germany are very different. So we don't look at Europe as Western Europe or Southern Europe or all of Central Europe as one entity. We have to look at them as very unique, specific countries. And so we're solving a problem for Germany, or we're solving a problem for Ireland, or we're solving a problem for the UK. We're not solving a problem for Europe. And they have very different needs, and they do have very different requirements about how they manage that data. But for us, the way our technology works and our services work, it's not really irrelevant to us. It's not important. That the operator has to deal with that, but we don't worry about that too much.
Beyond the Black Arrow issue, what's your view more broadly about privacy and about whether do you think the industry will be able to use information, that there is so much information out there about consumption? Are you concerned that that's an obstacle where advertisers platforms, programmers won't be able to get access or use information the way they could to make advertising as successful as it could be.
We're a long ways from having the need to be able to have that level of information. And first and foremost, I am a consumer as well, and I wouldn't want that information out there as a person. And so I think that what we have today is it's a very unsophisticated way in which advertising is done on a relevant basis, relevant to where it can be. There is so much we can do with the information that's out there today that's not considered private. What kind of device, what piece of content's being consumed, third-party data that you can get from a lot of different third-party sources around purchasing behavior. I think all of those things play. There is so much upside. We're here, and what you just described is here. Let's just go from here to here, and you're literally talking tens of billions of dollars of opportunity. So I don't think we're even in the realm of having a need for that, nor do I think it's relevant or important. And we don't build our business, we don't build our systems, we don't build any of our processes dependent on that kind of information.
It sounds like you're describing maybe a bit more of a consensus around using this data, and privacy concerns than, maybe around something like measurement, which to me seems like it's still a long way from consensus. But is there a pretty good, on the business side, consensus about about the dangers of PII, not going that far, not pushing it beyond what you really need to?
Yeah, I don't see, in our experiences as a business and dealing with customers and the industry at large, we've not seen anybody that doesn't have a high respect for those requirements and those rules. And so we've not seen anybody want to push those boundaries. And I think everybody's very keenly aware of that boundary, and nobody wants to violate that. I've yet to come across anybody that says, oh, we should try to push the limit on that. It's really quite the opposite, which is how can we take advantage of the information that we do have? And that for us, that's a big start. We don't need, there's no upside to go into that part of the business. So we highly respect that, and we don't build anything, like I said, we don't touch it, we don't see it, we don't have any way of accessing the PII data. Not interested.
Yeah.
Not interested.
All right, hands off.
Hands off.
So I want to talk a bit about you and your partners, because I think one of the things that is interesting that you hear a lot in the multi-channel video world is how impossible it is to sort of be on the outside trying to sell in. And you're not a cable operator, you're not a satellite provider, but you work with them all over the world. And I want you to talk a little bit about being a vendor to partner with the platforms out there. And look, I know you have investments from folks in that business, but talk a bit about what the realities are like trying to sell into that world.
I think for any small entrepreneurial company dealing with large, complex companies, satellite, telco, cable in our space, or if you think about any selling into manufacturing or any of those kinds of things, there are always challenges. What's unique about the cable, satellite, telco industry is you've got a relatively small company like Black Arrow going up and selling into an AT&T or a Comcast or a Time Warner, and you do have inherent challenges in working through the process. But I think one of the things that we found in working with these guys, and what we think is frankly a competitive advantage, is we know that. We understand what it takes to be able to work with these large, complex companies. One of the things they look for is scalable, commercial-grade reliability. So the ability to offer your technology in a scalable way that is able to perform at what we call carrier grade is huge. So we think it's a huge advantage to be able to build product that scales, that has that kind of reliability, and also learn how to navigate those really complex hierarchies, from the tech guys to the sales guys to the strategy guys to the purchasing guys to the legal guys. And so you have to deal with all those different groups. I always kind of joke, you have to keep everybody happy to be able to get a deal done. But frankly, getting the deal done is step one. Being able to continue to perform for that customer on a day in and day out basis is really important. I think the real key is if you're just a technology provider, you're going to become irrelevant very quickly. And so what you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to not just provide good tech, but you've got to be able to provide a value add. What are the things you can do to help make them move their business forward? And what Black Arrow is able to do is we don't just sell tech. We are a tech company at the end of the day. 80% of our people and our time and our effort is building really good, solid tech. But what we add is the layer of thought leadership around how do you create an advertising ecosystem in this whole new world? How do you move dollars in a much more efficient and effective way? How do you make more money out of the content that you have today? That's where Black Arrow adds its leverage. And so if we were just selling tech, we'd be commoditized and be out of business in no time. But the ability to layer in all that thought leadership, and we actually in many ways help customers build their business cases. How do you make money in an on-demand space? How do you make money when you want to take both your on-demand and your new linear over-the-top solutions and leverage them off of one common platform? So that's what we do, and that's how you navigate and be successful with these guys. They're very open to entrepreneurial companies, but you can't just go in and push one product and be done. It's not a fire and forget sales model. It has to be very much, if you want to view them as, and you have to take them as a customer, you have to view them as their success is our success. And so we build our deal structures in such a way.
You're describing a service business much more than a product business.
It's
hard to draw the line, but it's
but we are a product company, but very much. But the idea is that we've got to be able to provide a level of service to them that says, wow, these guys add value to us over and above just really cool tech. And that's where we think we make a big distinction, and that's what makes you successful in these industries. I think it would be hard to. I think it's inappropriate to say that the cable or satellite or telco industries are hard industries. Well, they're all hard industries. If you were trying to sell into manufacturing or consumer goods, it would be the same thing. I can't imagine what it's like selling into Walmart. And so the idea of being able to do this is we have to look for what is the thing that makes Black Arrow different and unique. Really good tech, really good solutions, and an ability to help them win in their business. That's really what makes the difference.
Well, how about if if I've spent my life in sales and television, or let's call it video, is what you're doing and the broader ecosystem you're a part of, are we going to make the sales guy irrelevant? Is everything going towards a programmatic world where, look, it's just a matter of, it's not the technology, but it's the implementation of all of that, and a system that gets created, which really is, we just sort of set it, and the data gets so good, our use of it so much more sophisticated that really that people part of it just isn't that important.
It's a good question. I wish I had a crystal ball. The two things. One is, as I said earlier, one of the things that's occurring is there are some very unique things that the digital world does very well. There are some things that are done very well in the traditional TV landscape. And what we believe is going to happen is that you're going to see the best practice of both come together. We believe that the programmatic very much is going to have a role in television. Will it be 100%? Probably not. But will be some subset of that for sure. And what that tipping point will be and when it will happen, hard to know. But for sure, those kind of components of automation will occur. But at the same time, there's absolutely a certain need for what the TV world does today, all the way from the trading desks at the agencies, all the way through the sell side, the demand side platforms and the sell side platforms. We think that there's a huge opportunity for the human side. So I don't really think it's just like the idea of, is the digital world, are the dollars going to digital, vice versa?
Right.
I don't think it's a combination. It's really going to be a combination of both. So I don't think programmatic can take 100%, but I think they are going to move into the space for sure. And I think that the sell side platforms and the demand side platforms are going to have a very big relevancy for sure. What that percentage is going to be, I don't even think it's 1%, 2% today on TV. It's very low.
Right.
But it will continue to grow, and you're hearing a lot of noise about it. There's been a lot of activity in the marketplace for that, and we'll see more and more of that as we go.
Dean, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you for joining us on CITI Media Reporter. Good night.